The sun burned over the dusty Apache plains like a silent warning, the kind that made even the wind hesitate before slipping between the crooked stalls of the frontier slave market, where fear lived in every corner, and misery was bought and sold like sacks of grain. The air trembled with the shouts of traders, the clinking of iron chains, and the thick scent of sweat, dust, and something far darker, hopelessness. Amid all that, she stood, Nahala, the most beautiful Apache woman many had ever seen, though she wished desperately not to be noticed at all. Her wrists were loosely bound with rawhide, her ankles dusted with red soil, her hair a long raven-black river fell over her shoulders like a cloak woven by the night itself. Her eyes, sharp as obsidian and just as deep, glowed with the fierce dignity of a free spirit forced into captivity. People stared, men whispered, some looked at her with desire, others with greed. But not one saw the storm within her except the cowboy who had just ridden into town on a tall, sorrel stallion, his hat tilted low to shield a pair of eyes that held more sorrow than the entire desert. His name was Colt McCain, a man known across the territories as a rancher who spoke little, fought less, but could break a wild horse with a whisper and mend a wounded soul with a look. He had come to the market for supplies, feed, rope, medicine, but fate had her own plans that day, and she revealed them the instant Colt's gaze collided with Nahala's. She didn't look away. She didn't blink. She simply lifted her chin in defiance, as if daring him to acknowledge her, not as property, not as a prize, but as a warrior whose spirit refused to bow. And in that heartbeat, something ancient, something electric passed between them. The auctioneer's voice cracked through the air. Next, the Apache girl finest you'll find today. Strong, young, and trained to obey. Lies, all of them. Nahala had never obeyed a man in her life, and she had no plans to start now unless it meant survival. She had already lost her father to a raid, her mother to sickness, her tribe to the government relocation, and her freedom to the hands of bounty hunters who saw her beauty as a curse worth profit. But she still had her mind, her courage, her fire, and in the moment she saw Colt McCain sitting tall on that saddle, something unexpected sparked inside her. Hope, quiet but unmistakable. Like the first ember that could grow into a roaring flame, Colt didn't know what drew him to her. Maybe it was her eyes untamed, full of stories he somehow felt responsible for. Maybe he saw his own loneliness reflected in her gaze. Or maybe it was destiny, wearing a dust coat. Either way, he dismounted and walked closer, each step measured, slow, deliberate, like a man approaching a frightened wild stallion who might either run or charge. Nahala watched him, her breath steady but deep, every muscle poised for whatever came next. When he reached the front of the crowd, she leaned forward slightly, her voice low, firm, and unexpectedly calm as she whispered the words that would change both their lives forever. "Buy me, cowboy." The auctioneer gasped in outrage. Some men laughed, a few whistled, and one drunk spat in the dust as if offended that a savage woman dared speak first. But Colt didn't laugh, didn't flinch. Those three words struck him like a hammer to the ribs. He had been asked for many things in his life: help, mercy, forgiveness, but never had anyone asked to be bought by him. Her voice carried no fear, no shame, only determination. And he understood instantly. She wasn't begging. She was choosing him. And that meant something. "Why?" Colt asked quietly, his tone more concern than curiosity. "Because you are the only one here with kindness in your eyes," she replied. "And if a man must own me, let it be the one who will not break me." Her words sliced through him deeper than any blade ever had. Nahala had read him in a single glance, a skill only those who had suffered knew how to wield. Colt felt the weight of it, the honor, and the responsibility, and something inside him shifted, as if an old wound he didn't know still bled suddenly throbbed awake. The bidding began. Men raised their hands, calling out numbers, voices eager and ugly. Each bid felt like a punch to Colt's chest. He didn't want to treat her like an object, but if he didn't step in, someone far worse would. Someone who saw her beauty as a trophy, not a soul. So he bid, quietly at first, then stronger, matching each cruel voice with a steady resolve that surprised even him. The crowd grew restless as the price climbed higher than any Apache captive had ever been sold for. The drunk tried to outbid him, then the ranch foreman with the scar across his jaw, then a wealthy landowner who wanted her as entertainment. But Colt didn't stop, couldn't stop. For every dark intention in the crowd, he answered with another bid until the marketplace fell silent, and the hammer dropped. Sold. To Colt McCain. Gasps rippled across the square. Even the sun seemed to pause. Colt stepped forward, cutting Nahala's bindings with the swift flick of his pocket knife. The moment her wrists were free, she didn't shrink or retreat. Instead, she lifted her hands and rubbed the raw marks with dignity intact. She looked up at Colt not as her owner, but as the man who had just risked money, reputation, and maybe his life for her. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling with relief and exhaustion. She tried hard to hide. "Don't thank me yet," Colt replied softly. "I don't plan to own you, just get you somewhere safe." But safety was a luxury neither of them would enjoy for long. The auctioneer scowled. The scar-jawed foreman glared with hatred burning deadly in his eyes. The wealthy landowner muttered to his guards. The drunk spat again, this time at Colt's boots. Trouble was brewing, fast trouble that had teeth. Colt led Nahala to his horse. She touched the animal's mane gently, whispering something in Apache. The stallion snorted softly, as if answering her. Colt watched, stunned. Horses didn't warm to strangers easily, especially his. Yet this one, stubborn as a mule, lowered his head for her. Colt couldn't explain it, but the world felt different now. Like something larger than both of them had started moving. They rode out of the market, dust swirling around them like a veil. But before they could leave town, Colt heard footsteps fast, angry, closing in. "McCain." The foreman's voice thundered. "You think you can just take her? That Apache bitch belongs with her kind working under men like us." Nahala stiffened behind Colt on the saddle. He felt her hands tighten slightly around his waist, not in fear, but in ready defiance. Colt turned slowly. "She's under my protection," the foreman spat. "Then you're a dead man." The attack came fast. 3 men lunged. Colt knocked one aside with his elbow, blocked a punch, and slammed another into a water trough. Nahala jumped down and grabbed a fallen stick, swinging it with the precision of a warrior trained by necessity, not choice. Her strike cracked across a man's jaw, dropping him instantly. Colt glanced at her, impressed. Despite the chaos, but more men poured out of the saloon, men who had lost the bid, men who hated Apache people, men who liked violence more than whiskey. Colt knew they couldn't fight them all. He grabbed Nahala's arm and pulled her onto the horse. "Hold on." She wrapped her arms around him tightly as the horse launched forward with a powerful leap, hooves pounding, dust exploding behind them. Shouts erupted. Bullets cracked through the air. Nahala pressed her cheek against Colt's back. He felt her heartbeat, rapid but strong, echoing against his spine. They rode until town disappeared behind them, swallowed by the desert. Only when they reached a ridge overlooking miles of open land did Colt slow the horse. Nahala exhaled shakily, the adrenaline leaving her limbs trembling. "You fought well," Colt said. "I fight to live," she replied. "Freedom tastes better than fear." He looked at her, seeing her strength more clearly now. Not fragile, not helpless. A survivor, a flame, but flames attracted danger. Colt knew the men wouldn't stop. Not now, not ever. Buying her hadn't ended her nightmare, it had tied his fate to hers. Nahala watched him with wary eyes. "You regret it?" He shook his head. "No, but it's going to change everything." She nodded slowly. "Then let it change." The desert night fell fast around Colt McCain and Nahala as they rode deeper into the wilderness. The sky blooming with stars, like 1,000 silent witnesses to a destiny neither of them had chosen, but both were trapped inside. The cool wind brushing against their faces as if urging them to keep moving, because the danger behind them was not just anger, it was hatred, vengeance, and greed pooling into one unstoppable force. They finally stopped near a narrow canyon, where Colt knew outlaws rarely traveled, and he helped Nahala off the horse, her legs unsteady, but her spirit still fierce, that fire in her eyes refusing to dim. Colt gathered wood for a fire, and for the first time since meeting him, Nahala let herself sit, wrapping her arms around her knees, staring at the flames like they were telling her a story she'd forgotten. "They won't stop," she whispered, her voice low, fragile but filled with truth. Colt nodded. "I know. But they'll have to go through me first." She looked at him, truly looked at him, as if trying to read his soul. "Why risk yourself? You owe me nothing." Colt exhaled, staring into the fire as though searching for words buried beneath the embers. "I've seen too much taken from people who didn't deserve it. Lost too much myself. I'm done standing by while good people suffer." She didn't respond at first, but her eyes softened, and she whispered, "Then perhaps fate did send me to you." But even as she spoke, Colt felt something in the air shift, the heavy silence that falls before a storm breaks. And the storm came at dawn. Gunshots cracked through the canyon, shattering the morning calm into shards of panic. Nahala jolted awake as Colt grabbed his rifle, pushing her behind a rock just as a bullet pinged off the stone beside them. Dust exploded everywhere as voices echoed from above, voices Colt recognized. The scar-jawed foreman, the landowner, drunks and hired hands, and more. They had come with a small posse, tracking horses, following footprints, smelling blood. Colt cursed under his breath. These men weren't here to negotiate. They were here to kill him and take Nahala, or worse. Nahala gripped his arm. "Go. Leave me. You can still escape." But Colt shook his head violently. "I don't abandon people. Not again." It was the first time he hinted at a past full of ghosts. She didn't ask, not yet, but she placed her hand over his in silent understanding. Bullets struck the canyon walls, sending rocks tumbling. Colt fired back, hitting one man's hat clean off. Nahala scanned the cliffs with sharp eyes trained by survival, and spotted a narrow side passage. There, without hesitation, Colt grabbed her hand and they sprinted through the slit of canyon walls as bullets chased them like angry bees. His horse followed, hooves pounding, nostrils flaring in panic. The passage opened into a wider basin with nowhere else to run, but Nahala wasn't afraid. She picked up a fallen spear left by some traveler, held it with practiced strength, and stood beside Colt. "I fight with you," she said. And he believed her. The first attacker burst through the passage, and Nahala swung the spear so fast the man didn't even cry out before hitting the ground. Colt fired warning shots, trying to make the others hesitate, but hatred makes men reckless. They charged. Colt and Nahala fought side by side, her swift, agile, precise. Him strong, steady, unyielding. Dust rose around them like a storm of ghosts. Colt's hat flew off. Nahala's hair whipped around her like a dark halo. She took down two men. Colt knocked another out cold. But there were too many. And then, suddenly, the scar-jawed foreman grabbed Nahala from behind, pressing a knife to her throat. Colt froze, muscles locking, heart slamming against his ribs. The foreman sneered. "You think you can protect this savage? She belongs to the highest bidder, and that ain't you." Nahala gasped as the blade pressed deeper. Colt saw her eyes. They weren't afraid of dying, only afraid he'd blame himself. The foreman raised the knife and Colt reacted with a roar he didn't know he possessed, tackling the man so violently they crashed into the dirt, the knife skidding away. Nahala scrambled up just as Colt smashed his fist into the foreman again and again until the man stopped moving. The landowner and the others suddenly hesitated. They had come for money, cruelty, and sport, not to die. When they saw the foreman fall, they backed away slowly, retreating through the canyon, mumbling curses, but not daring another attack. Nahala knelt beside Colt, her breath shaken, her hand gently touching the blood on his cheek. "You saved me." Colt looked at her, chest still heaving. "We saved each other." They left the basin and rode west toward Colt's ranch, an isolated stretch of land surrounded by rolling hills, abandoned barns, and a quiet river where the world felt almost kind again. When they arrived, Nahala looked around, her expression softening. It wasn't grand, wasn't rich, but it was peaceful, a place where her spirit could breathe. Colt dismounted and extended a hand to her. "You can stay here until you decide your next step." Nahala stepped down, her feet touching the ground as if stepping into a new life. "And what is your next step, Colt McCain?" she asked gently. He looked at her with a vulnerability he rarely showed. Maybe it's making sure you're safe enough to choose your own. Days passed. She helped around the ranch, cared for the horses, cooked meals with herbs she gathered herself. In every sunrise, Colt found her standing by the river, whispering prayers in Apache. He learned her language slowly. She learned his scars more quickly. They talked about her tribe, her past, her dreams. They talked about his mother, his lost younger brother, the way loneliness had carved a home in his chest until she arrived. And without either of them saying it aloud, something tender and powerful grew between them, something not built on ownership, but on choice, on respect, on destiny. But peace never lasts long in the West. One evening, Colt spotted smoke rising from the far ridge signals, Apache signals. Nahala's heart pounded. "My people," she whispered. A scouting band of her tribe arrived the next day, wary at first, their bows raised, their eyes sharp. But when they saw Nahala safe, alive, standing freely at Colt's side, they lowered their weapons. Their leader, a stern older warrior named Tahot, approached Nahala. "We searched for you. We thought you lost." Nahala swallowed hard. "I was lost. Until he found me." Tahot studied Colt, his expression unreadable. "A white man who fights for an Apache woman is rare." Colt nodded respectfully. She deserved better than what the world tried to give her. The warrior's eyes softened only slightly. "Your kindness is noted, but her place is with her people." Nahala's heart twisted at his words. She looked at Colt, at the ranch, at the quiet safety she'd finally known. Then she looked at her people, the ones she had thought she'd never see again. She couldn't choose. Her breath trembled. Colt stepped closer, voice calm but aching. "Nahala, you don't owe me anything. You're free to choose your path." She felt tears burn her eyes, rare and raw. "But freedom means nothing if it takes me from the only person who looked at me like I mattered." Tahot watched quietly, understanding dawning on his face. "Your heart has spoken." Before anyone could say more, gunshots exploded across the ridge. The landowner and a new band of hired killers had followed the Apache scouts, thinking they were allied with Colt. Chaos erupted. Arrows and bullets flew. Nahala shielded a child. Colt tackled a gunman. Tahot sent warriors to flank the attackers. The battle was fast, brutal, and filled with the screams of the dying as dust turned red beneath their feet. Colt fought until his arms trembled, taking a bullet grazed to the shoulder, but refusing to fall. Nahala threw herself between him and a gunman just long enough for Tahot to take the enemy down. When the dust settled, the attackers lay scattered, defeated, and the ridge echoed with silence again. Nahala rushed to Colt, her hands trembling as she pressed a cloth to his wound. "Why do you keep protecting me?" she demanded, tears streaking her cheeks. Colt winced, but smiled faintly. "Because the world already tried to break you. I won't let it finish the job." The Apache scouts prepared to return home, but Tahot placed a hand on Nahala's shoulder. "You are welcome with us, always, but the spirits brought you to him for a reason." Nahala turned to Colt, her voice steady, full of certainty she hadn't felt since childhood. "My place is here, if you will have me." Colt swallowed hard, emotion thick in his throat. "Nahala, you don't belong to me, but you can stay with me, as long as you choose." She stepped closer, her forehead resting against his. "Then I choose you, cowboy."